We're still working on trig identities, and I feel like there was a little bit of confusion last week, so we're going to try this again. All we're talking about on these trig identities, we're talking about a couple things. We're talking about sine and cosine that have been shifted pi halves. So look at the graph down here. Here's pi halves right here. So if you take sine, the sine graph, and you shift it over, it's going to sit right on top of that cosine graph. Same with the cosine. If you shift this cosine graph over pi halves, it's going to be the exact same graph as the sine graph. So when either of those things are shifted 90 degrees or pi halves, they end up equaling the other function. So cosine shifted equals pi halves equals sine theta. Sine shifted pi halves equals cosine theta. The other identity that you need to remember is that, and this has to do with the odd and even. So remember, sine of a negative theta. So let's finish this sine graph right here. So looks something like that, right? So look at, if we say sine of pi halves, we're up here. Sine of negative pi halves, we're down here. So sine of a negative theta is equal to, because that's -1, is equal to -1 times sine of the positive theta, right? -1 times sine of pi halves. So that's an identity to keep in mind. But look at cosine theta. The cosine graph, they're the same on both sides. So cosine of a negative theta equals the cosine of positive theta. So those are things to keep in mind. Now we're just going to use logic. So if we're given this, or if this is true, this identity is true, we know that it is, sine of the negative theta is equal to negative sine theta. So look at this right here. We now know that negative sine of positive theta is equal to negative 0.86. All right, because that identity tells us that it's true. And if we know that cosine shifted is equal to sine, all we have to do is multiply both sides by -1, and we get the negative of cosine shifted is going to equal negative sine theta. So that means the negative of cosine shifted is also going to equal all of that stuff. But what we want to know is, we want to find positive. Well, we would just divide both sides by -1, or multiply both sides by -1. Negative divided by negative is positive. So now cosine of all of that stuff shifted is equal to positive 0.86. And I think that I have it down here still. So look at, yeah, I just simplified this stuff right here to what it equaled. And then instead of this cosine of all that, I went ahead and put in the positive version. So the opposite of that positive 0.86, which is what cosine shifted would equal, it's equal to the negative. And although I think up above I probably explained it just as well. And this is what the final answer would look like. And that's it. I hope that explains the shifting and the even and odd trig functions a little bit better.